Welcome to our continual series of virtual voices. Our speaker today is Ambassador Marco Suazo, who is the head of UNITAR's office in New York, who is working with universities and internship program in expanding the knowledge of United Nations. Our moderator is Apurv Gupta, who is on our board of directors. And over to you, Apurv.
Thank you so much, Dr. Delbach, Ambassador. It's a pleasure you're joining us today at World Information Transfer's Virtual Voices series. Thank you everyone who's joined from around the world to listen to Ambassador Suazo. He's a career diplomat in the Foreign Services of Honduras, and he has served at various positions at the Permanent Mission of Honduras at the United Nations since the 1990s, including representing Honduras in the Security Council from 1995 to 1996. In 2002, he was actually the chairman of the second committee of the UN General Assembly as well, at a time when it was leading its creation of the Financing for Developmental Office of UNDESA. Since 2015, he has been with UNITAR, where he currently heads the New York office and galvanizes UNITAR's partnerships with major institutions around the world like Columbia Law School, Yale University, and many others. With that, Ambassador, thank you once again for joining us today, and I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christine. Thank you very much to the World Information Transfer, the Virtual Voices program. It's a real pleasure to be with you today, with participants, beneficiaries. Also, thanks to Marianne Azur for conveying us the invitation in the first stage, and all the other panelists that will join us today. Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I am very pleased to remember certain things, like when I was in the Security Council or when I was chairing the main committee. Later on, I also chaired the Committee on Disarmament. After I left the UNDESA, I have been in the UNDESA and the United Nations twice, but mostly my career is as a trained diplomat from my country. I am very pleased with the results achieved taking over the UNITAR office just 5 years ago. So we are going to talk today about UNITAR. We was exchanging at the beginning, and I was interested in telling to our audience a little bit about the origins, a little bit of the history of UNITAR. There is a reason why we exist, how it's organized, how is the Sustainable Development Goals agenda shaping the new work of UNITAR from the traditional classical inception in 1963 to the evolution and to how to respond to crisis, or how we have been responding to crises like the COVID pandemic, that there is no area of the world or the human society who has not been touched by it. So let's start for the origins. As you may know, you have in front of you the United Nations Institute for Training and Research Statute. We were created in 1963. And the first question that it comes is why? Well, it was a need on that period of decolonization process. The United Nations, you have to remember, was created in San Francisco in 1945, but the work of the United Nations started from 1940s, even before the World War II was ended. After immediately the signatory in San Francisco of the United Nations Charter, by 1950, we were already in a Cold War period, and the confrontation of political powers was already starting to taking shape. These confrontations led to a lot of new states to become independent. And that's the period of decolonization. If you recall, the United Nations Charter speak about the United Nations Trusteeship Council. It was another council that nobody talk about it today. Together with the Security Council and the Economic and Social Council, General Assembly, International Court of Justice are the charter bodies that we call it in the United Nations. So the Trusteeship Council was created to lead those new countries, new democracies, in certain cases, to get full benefit of, through this independence, the benefit of participating and to be part of the new international world order. So there was a need on those days, by 1957, 63, to prepare those new countries on the diplomatic cadre for addressing their needs or their issues. By saying that is, they were able to create their own organization, their own diplomatic corps to come to New York or to United Nations agencies, represent the country in a very dignified manner, and to be able to cope with more senior and pretty well-established diplomatic civil service diplomatic around the world. So it was not the same, a newly independent country from Northern Africa to come to New York by 1963 and start to a dialogue or a conversation with a young diplomat from the United Kingdom, from France, or even from Italy. The knowledge was totally differentiated. So the General Assembly by 1963 decided that there was a need to create an institute to prepare those diplomatic new elected, coming to independence state, and to help them to create their own diplomatic service, their academies for diplomatic service and things like that. Those are the reason why UNITAR was created in 1963. You can see Article 1, the purposes of UNITAR, and it's basically enhancing the effectiveness of the United Nations, achieving a major objective of the organization by the performance of the function. And so it goes like that. So this is the real origin. This is the need that the international community has. Between 1963 by 1983, the United Nations started with 51 countries. Now we are 193. But in the period of 1963 to 1973, for that decade, for example, is when most of the member states became independent and became members of the United Nations. And that the crucial period it was UNITAR was doing a lot of work preparing those diplomatic academies, those diplomats. The General Assembly also decided that headquarters of UNITAR was New York. So we had a building and we have our offices in First Avenue, 44th Street, just across the United States mission to the United States, in front of the United Nations headquarters. By 1993, the statute also prescribed that we have to live or we have to make or work through voluntary contributions. That means that the Institute was not receiving any kind of income from the assessed contributions to member states, which are obligatory contributions to maintain the United Nations headquarters in New York and around the world. So member states decided, yes, we need this institute. Yes, we will use this. Are we going to finance voluntarily? That creates a kind of a handicap for the institute, because when the finances at the national levels are in a good shape, countries, governments are more willing to share that wealth with institutes like UNITAR or other organizations that were created on the. But when the finances around the globe are bad, for example, today with COVID-19, with the governments really worried about how to combat this pandemic, then the finances are scarce. And if you are in the voluntary contribution process, UNITAR is the last institute you will think about to provide financial support. So there are periods in which is very fluctuant, and then we have a good years, like we said, and then there are years that were very bad. So by 1993, the institute ran in a very difficult finances situation, and that building was taken over by the UN Secretariat in order to be able to maintain the institute alive and uncover the dues that the institute had with different organizations or different services. New York is a very expensive city. The Swiss government then make an offer to host the UNITAR in Geneva. And, you know, Geneva is the big hub for all the United Nations special agencies. Almost all of them are based there. And then it gives us a good treatment in order to institute to reconfigure and to reorganize and to also being able to see his it's going to be viable for the future. So resilient as it is, a new model was created, and then the institute and the new directors start to work out a way to put the institute again on the map. So that's why this is the second part of the when I wanted to talk to you, how the institute is organized. And the institute is organized with headquarters in Geneva now. Its main office remains in New York. I mean, one of the most important outpost offices remain in New York. This is the office that I'm directing now. 5 years I took over. And then we have a second big office in Hiroshima, which is dedicated to, you are very fast, Pelayo, which is moving to disarmament and collaboration. The Japanese government and the prefecture of Hiroshima are supporting the Hiroshima office. And he does a lot of programs on Africa and also in the Asia Pacific region. And then we have another office in Port Harcourt, Nigeria, is a project office dedicated to development and in the African countries. This is also a project office, therefore, if they do not have a new project on Sinaraj, it's very difficult to be funded. Mostly we depend on our activities for developing countries contribution like Sweden, Italy, Spain, Japan. You know, we prepare our projects and we convince or it's part of the ODA, Cooperation for Development. And so that's how we manage to keep. So this is the organization. Basically, we have created a strategic framework for every 3-4 years. The one that you are seeing now is the strategic framework for 2020 to 2021, I guess it is, from 2018 to 2021. The executive director of the institute is Mr. Nikhil Seth. Is a former diplomat from India, has devoted all his career in New York in the sustainable development area. He also was a kind of the secretariat of the Sustainable Development Goals, the Conference of Rio +20, who is the core conference that shaped the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030. This strategy have been conceived in 4 pillars. If we can go to the pillars, Pelayo, I will appreciate. Peace, sustainable development, and then there are what we call it. These are the pillars: people, peace, and then there are 2 more. You can go down: prosperity, planet, and cross-fertilizing knowledge and expertise. These 5 pillars encompass the 17 Sustainable Development Goals for us. We detected that in planet, in peace, and people, and prosperity, we can target a specific sustainable development goal. And cross-fertilizing knowledge expertise is because the Sustainable Development Goals are a non-silos approach, which means the SDGs are interlinked and they help each other, one to achieve another one. And there is no one who is has a priority. All of them has an important. You cannot combat poverty if you don't have a good education, if you don't have a good health services, if you don't have an economic framework at the country level. If the Minister of Finance, for example, do not allocate resources for specific projects on health and education, then you are not developing the sustainable development goal in a very homogeneous strategy. So therefore, that's why we have this cross-fertilizing approach to the sustainable development goals. So if you go back to the priorities of the strategic framework, Pelayo, I'll appreciate this one. So this is the most important element for us. We have to provide high quality learning solutions, address the capacity development of the individuals, organizations, and institutions. We are to advise and supporting governments, the UN and other partners with knowledge services, including those that are technologically based. Information technology now is a very important element on our services. We have to facilitate knowledge and expertise sharing through network and innovative process, like the one we are doing with you today. This is part of one clear example of our core function number 3. And we have to have an integrated innovative strategies, approaches, and methodologies into our learning knowledge. And for example, for that, I can talking about webinars, Zoom conferences, and video conferences in response to the pandemic. This is a clear example of how number 4 is applied. I'm going to make a little parenthesis here because when I was talking about origins and organization, I mentioned to you that we were created to help diplomatic corps and diplomatic services for member states in the United Nations. So that was the classic training that we were doing, diplomat trainings. So as the United Nations agenda has been evolving through the United Nations major conferences, there was a need also to train those diplomats in any particular Beijing +20, Rio +20, Denmark social development, Monterey finance for development. And that was creating an expanded market for us because that was encompasses not only the Foreign Service of the governments, but also the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Environment, the Minister of Education. With the Millennium Development Goals, then that enhanced even and broader more the training capacity or the training needs of member states. So the Institute was, by the nature of his service, forced to also to expand on all those areas. By logic and by you understand now, but the Sustainable Development Goals, then there is no a single area in which the Institute cannot interlink or interface with governments in every different level. Minister of Education, Minister of Health, Minister of Finance, Minister of Social Services, Minister of Planning, Minister of Human Resources, things like that. Because the evolving agenda of the United Nations create an evolving need for member states. And so the Institute is to supply at least this sharing experience among themselves about methodological approaches for education and for training of their senior or junior cadres. And then we also have to keep in mind that member states come to New York at the highest level, head of states, minister, prince and crown, princes or kings, and head of government every year to New York to tackle specific issues of the agenda. So those diplomats, those missions in New York play a crucial role in preparing a statement, in preparing reports, in preparing resolutions, every single General Assembly, and to be able to also to go back to their peers in their own country and highlight it to them how the United Nations works, what is the agenda in every single General Assembly session, and what are the needs for the governments to be prepared in any specific committee or topic of the General Assembly. So that's where our institute play a major role. So this is part of the understanding that I wanted to have, how we evolve on our organization, in our services, and our products to member states, and how has been diversified through the evolving agenda of the United Nations, which has created an evolving need for member states in every specific area. And we have to start for the understanding that the United Nations itself was created with the specific purpose of avoiding war for future generations, like World War I and World War II. That was the main scope. Create a legal system that make available to member states to resolve the dispute in a tribunal in a specific way. That's why the ICJ was created. On that model, now we have the Law of the Sea Tribunal, now we have the International Criminal Court, now we have the Civil High Authority in Kingston, Jamaica. During the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, with another set of new wave of new member states came up because many countries were reconfiguring themselves, were splitting, like the former Yugoslavia. 5 countries came out of this: Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Slovenia, Serbia, and so on. The former Soviet Union was break up by their own individual processes, and like 10 or 15 countries came out of this: Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Belarus, you name it. There was a new wave of new countries coming up, being members of the United Nations, and therefore there was a new need also to address specific issues. Guess we covered more or less what is the origins, what is the organizations, what is the agenda, and the services that we provide to member states, and how that services and those products that we do has been evolving also in our delivery of services. So I was stopped in 1993 when we moved to Geneva. We kept the office in New York, one of the most important ones. We created the office in Hiroshima, and we have a office project in Port Harcourt in Nigeria. So the Institute also evolved and reorganized, and then we created a new configuration in order to fulfill those pillars. We can go to the strategic framework of like this. For example, we have a promote peace and just inclusive societies. We can share those documents online for all the participants that wanted to have it. And so the pillar of for promote peace is basically dealing with providing services, training, how to negotiate, how to mediate, multilateral negotiations, and things like that. People's well-being is related to the whole, for example, this COVID crisis is deal with that. And basically we are sharing knowledge with member states. We are interlinking with them. We're trying to provide the most support that we can, or methodological approaches to understanding and to sharing the new trends and things like that. And planet is also another one of the bigger pillars that we have. We try to see how understand life on land, how to understand life below water, climate change, renewable energies, and things like that. And then the other was the cross-fertilizing and economic development. So this is what we normally are providing, because those pillars interlink among themselves, and then you can allocate it individual goals on them. But you say it's a circle, it's a donut, which evolves, and each one of these pillars feed up the need of the other. So this is the most important thing to understand about our services. At this point, I'm going to more talk about a little bit of my office, the New York office of UNITAR. So at the beginning, we saw the need to create a new, how we call it, approach.
Yep.
And since we live from voluntary contributions, then we have a need to develop a more, how I can say this, aggressive understanding of our services just for diplomats in New York. And basically, we can call this capacity building and training sessions, but in a nutshell, it's education per se. You can be a diplomat, a very seasoned diplomat. You have been posted in Moscow, you have been posted in Kenya, you have been posted in any different part of the world in a diplomatic setup, bilateral setup. New York is a multilateral setup. And the agendas and the pace and the negotiations are totally different. When you are in the bilateral setup, you have a counterpart and you have to negotiate a trade agreement or cultural exchange. It's two people negotiating across the table. I want this, you have to provide me this, and this is, it is easy to reach a conclusion and to see the outcome. In a multilateral setup, you have to engage in multilateral conversations. You don't talk to one, you talk to, in this case in New York, in the general, we talk to 193 counterparts. Each one of them have their own interests, have their own structure, have their own vision of how things has to be tackled. And so understanding and these multilateral settings and how to negotiate in them is a big challenge for new diplomats, those who are starting their careers, or for senior diplomats who has been only in a bilateral setup. They never been in a multilateral, even if they understand international law, history, things like that. Having in a conference room and negotiating with 20 or 40 diplomats for any single region, Africa, Asia, Latin America, Middle East, and seeing everyone raising their hand and making adjustment and language purposes, then it can be frustrating. So they do not are able to cope with those. So we created a set of programs on understanding multilateral negotiations, understanding conflict resolution, understanding mediation. And what is the best part of it is that since we are enabling these conversations, we are not a faculty per se. We are just enabling the best practices, the best methodology to reach out those diplomats. And where is this knowledge come from? It comes from academia, from big universities. It comes from the United Nations Secretariat staff, those who have been following these conferences or these meetings for years, from non-governmental organizations that are the grassroots level organizations. They work in the field, they interact with people, and so on. So we amalgamated all this knowledge, we motivated them, and then we put it together or offerings, things like that. So that's how this catalog of UNITAR came, and we send it every January at the early year for next year. This is the catalog. If you come back to the catalog, Pelayo, that we put it together for 2020. Normally, we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. It's a very proud year for UNITA and for the United Nations itself. The decision of the member state was, call it the future we want, the UN we need. I was having a conversation recently in another presentation, and I was telling the participants that the United Nations came out alive out of the big crisis, and after a failure of the previous international understanding on how to negotiate and how to resolve it, the League of Nations of the United Nations Society, who was based on Geneva. And so who couldn't imagine that the 75th anniversary, after all these up and downs and the international arena, will be cope with a global pandemic like COVID-19. And we have to celebrate the 75th anniversary on those premises, not being able to meet in a person basis or a face-to-face basis in the big conference room in the secretariat or in the setup in Geneva, but as we are doing today through a computer. When we created the United Nations computer were just something futuristic, something to come. The most important thing was to have a good coffee or a good tea, a round table, and to sit in there and to talk and take note with pencil and pens. And now we are basically virtually seeing each other to what I call it the new TV for us. And I was telling also my colleagues that it's amazing how when Facebook was coming to life like 15, 20 years ago, this generation was learning how to communicate among themselves and to each other. And we were arguing with them, do your homework, go to the park, do some physical activity, don't stay in front of the computer. Fate, all of us are in front of the computer now, and they are more, how I can say this, handy with all these tools, and us, people like me, have to learn how to do that. We are basically in a big Facebook setup today through Zoom, Teams, and those virtual platform. And
that is correct.
And this is the way, and we're going to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations in order to maintain our communities' health in a good parameter. So this is the catalog. So we envisage these projects or these programs with academies like Columbia University. We can put it that, Pelayo. We develop a multilateral negotiations, mediation, and mediation clinic. The clinic is the Law School of Columbia University is the one that is done by the School of Law. Every lawyer that goes to Columbia, they need to develop a mediation clinic. Professor Alex Carter is one of the leading on this field. She recently made a big publication about how to negotiate and how to take 10 big questions for a negotiation. It's the Sweden government who provides support for us. And we have been doing this project for almost 3 years in a row, if not 4. So it's a very successful program. Every time that we're going to open it by default of this year, a new training series of 3 or 4 elements. We organized, we support them through the Swedish government, and then the beneficiaries goes directly with the Columbia School of Law, and they receive a certificate by UNITAR and by with the logos of the School of Law of Columbia. They completed a setup of 3 courses. The certificate is signed by the Dean of the Law School of Columbia and by UNITAR, Executive Director Nikhil Seth. The complete 2 is the professors and myself. The complete 1 is only myself. It's just to give it some relevance to the training itself. Another project that we developed with the very seasoned diplomats and more experience is the Global Diplomacy Initiative. We can put it that, Pelayo. The Global Diplomacy Initiative.
Mark, unfortunately, I'm not able to share the screen. If they could give me back the permissions, please.
All right. So the Global Diplomacy Initiative is a project in which the UNITAR opened the doors to the students in the 3-state area, basically in a face-to-face format. And we developed a series of training with ambassadors or former ambassadors, and then with professors from different colleges and senior officers of the UN, the UN Secretariat. Like that, they benefited. Basically, we accredited them. They come to have meetings and trainings in the United Nations headquarters, they receive those sessions. It's a kind of 10 sessions every Friday, every full day. They complete a specific number of hours, and some colleges, like John Jay College, for example, when they complete it and they receive a certificate from UNITAR, they give a credit to their students to complete like extracurricular activities. Other students negotiated with them, but this is an opening of, you see, when you are in New York and you always talk about the United Nations, see the United Nations and things like that, and then you see the news, but these are students, which are studying international relations or history or diplomacy in the colleges in New York, they see that in TV, they don't really have an access. The UNITAR opened that door to these students, and so they come and they meet, they are accredited, they are sitting among diplomats through the whole project, they receive individual classes, and then they learn and they see how real negotiations happens, and this is an opportunity that is very difficult to cop. The panelist is a very experienced panelist. We have the former ambassador of Ukraine to New York, Yuri Sergeyev, who teach with us. We have
Ambassador, we actually have Yuri Sergeyev on the call right now.
Oh, all right.
As well.
It's a pleasure. Hello, Yuri. How are you? Here it is.
Ambassador, you're on mute. Ambassador Sergeyev, you're on mute.
Just move on.
All right. So, and then scroll, Pelayo, and then we can talk about this. And so several other high officials for the Secretariat and former ambassadors come. So it's a very important program. The other program that we had involved sometimes individual training courses with Yale University or other colleges. This is just the New York office. We normally had some very pragmatic programs, like we call it core programs for New York diplomats, like drafting resolutions, like multilateral negotiations, like training sessions, or preparation for the ECOSOC meeting in mid-year by June, July. The Learning Center that you are seeing is organized with UNDESA and is about the preparation for the high-level political forum that happen every year. We have keynote speakers, and the executive director that you see in the Save the Day, Mr. Nikhil Seth, addressed those sessions. This was the one we used this year. It was learning and training for sustainable development goals implementation in the COVID-19 era, because this pandemic has already a branding name, COVID-19 era, which has defining the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the work of the United Nations as a whole, and things like that. So we develop all these training sessions in a very broad context, adapting, as you can see, the services to the actual needs of member states. So that's how we provide those services today. These are just examples of the offerings of the products that we develop. Since we have been having these challenges and having these webinars and events organized through Zoom or video conferences like we do today, we also have to be innovative, and we will launch promptly guidelines for the United Nations drafting resolutions. We can cover that, Pelayo. And then this is a guidelines that we always teach. It's a course that takes 2 days. We have a MOOC where face-to-face, normally we do the kind of general assembly. I do the chairing of the meeting. No, the guidelines cover, Pelayo, please. And so this has been changed, and now we have to do this virtually. So we decided to go through the doing the training and to create these guidelines that will be online. Will be put it in a kind of ebook format for our member states to have it to delegates. Can we put it the flow chart, Pelayo, please, on these guidelines? So these guidelines basically goes from 0 to 10 in a flow chart, step-by-step explanation. What is the process of the United Nations resolutions? Why is so important? Because mostly the main work of the diplomats in New York is devoted to negotiate, to draft, to present, to defend, or to promote the country's interests. How they do that? Through a resolution process. So as you can see, you start with a big idea, and then you ended with adopting the resolution. And this is the step-by-step process that you have to follow. So these guidelines, you can take it and read it. It's less than 100 pages. And you don't need to have a lecture on this. You can basically understand. But we create also a little cartoon-based explanation about that to promote. All these documents has been put in French, English, Arabic, and Spanish, 4 basic language. That's what I could afford to do so. Chinese and Russian is more complex, and I didn't have the finances to produce them. I still looking for volunteers who wanted to finance these 2 translations. The authors has been already covered. They will be published. Recently, we're going to launch these guidelines, and there will be an ebook also in the United Nations library. So when people can download it and just cover a basic fee for the booklet, and we hope this new product will help the new diplomats or whoever wanted to understand what is a resolution in the United Nations and why delegates meet to do these negotiations with the rule of procedures, with the understanding of the certain topics and things like that. So this is what we do now. I was asked to also talk a little bit about how we can expand our knowledge or platform or other areas in which we can develop our activities. And this is very important question, because we can really enhance, but we are at a certain moment, our hands are tied, because we depend, as I said, on those voluntary contributions in the possibility we have to develop this new product, like the guidelines that you saw today, put it in front of member states, NGOs, or colleagues, in order to see if they're going to be able to finance those projects, because otherwise it's very difficult for us to produce these new materials, new contributions without having enough financial resources to do so. But we are always have a continued search and negotiations with academia, with non-governmental organizations, with the UN Secretariat, and with partners that may be interested in having this understanding of the work of the United Nations. Sometimes it's very basic. At many levels, sometimes everybody listens about the United Nations. Everybody says, oh, the United Nations don't do that. The United Nations is this. It's like the United Nations is an organism by itself, live by itself, feed by itself, and exists by itself. It's not. It's a conglomerate of states that comes together to feed, to maintain, and actually to dictate the policies and the actions of the United Nations. You see, recently there was a big conversation about the arms embargo on Iran. The Security Council met. There are 15 countries there. There are 15 representatives of the top of the government. They consult with the head of state of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They said, we vote in favor or against this decision. And so they follow that. Then, when you see in the news is the United Nations fails to produce the embargo, so what is it, the United Nations? And one of the first questions that I put to my diplomats, what do you understand what is the United Nations? And so this understanding sometimes it has to be clarified. This is a conglomerate, it's an organization by shareholders, and the shareholders are the member states. And so if the large majority by consensus decided an action like the Sustainable Development Goals, I mean, everybody is involved and everybody is responsible for it. If out of 15, 10 or 11 said, no, we don't like this, well, is what the Security Council decide, but the Security Council is a composition of member states. It's every single government that is responsible. So this is a kind of closing remarks that I have. I hope I fill up the expectation. Normally I said this to my beneficiaries, we don't like to give lectures. We like basically to share our knowledge. This is our duty. We put the best people in front of our participants or beneficiaries, but they also have something to say. They also have a degree of education. They also have a degree of knowledge, and they also can contribute to the exchange of information and to make this a better world for the future generations. So if you agree with me, I will stop here, and I am ready. If you have any questions or comments to make, I'll be very happy to take on them if I am able to. Otherwise, I will ask our dear Ambassador Yuri Sergeyev to help me out with some answers over there. Pleasure to see you, Yuri.
Well,
I stop here and I am in your hands now. Thank you very much for listening patiently to my, I hope it was useful.
Well, Ambassador, thank you very much for an exceptional presentation of both the UN SDGs and the best practices to your global diplomacy and sharing knowledge. We can help you if you need with the translation in Russian, because we have a large contingency of students in Ukraine. As you know, they speak all Russians and they are all professionals. And basically, we can help you with that if you need. With the Chinese, right at this moment, even though we also have a lot of Chinese, but basically at this moment, we could help you with that if you need to, just let us know. But thank you very much. It was just a fascinating presentation. Apurv, questions?
Excellent. Yes, I can see Ambassador Sergeyev has a question.
Yes.
Yeah, greetings from Kiev. It's great to see you, healthy, in a good mood. Thank you, Ambassador Suazo, for your presentation, always brilliant. And thank you, Dr. Durba, for organizing fantastic webinars during this summer. So I'm proud to be part of the UNITAR initiatives. And I can confess that UNITAR is an exact body to explain newly arrived diplomats and broader community how multilateral mechanism works, the role of the United Nations as the principal actor in multilateral diplomacy, as a major platform to encourage, as Ambassador said, encourage member states to produce mutually agreed regimes to reach common goals, both common goods and common risks. What is important for UNITAR, that UNITAR secure continuity of the United Nations institutional memory. What is also important, that doing that, UNITAR manifests a wrong nature of the isolationism in the interdependent and interconnected globalized world. I like the way the lectures and the courses on the multilateral diplomacy starts at the UNITAR. They start with the old parable about interdependence and the isolationism. It's nice, it's nice parable, and if I have it, I will repeat it because it is so emotional and explains a lot how we can't ignore anybody in the world. So the parable is, one day the mouse noticed that the owner of the farm had set up a mouse trap. She told about this chicken, sheep, and cow. But they all answered, the mouse trap is your problem. It has nothing to do with us. A bit later, a snake came into the mouse trap and bit the farmer's wife. Trying to cure her, they cooked chicken soup for her. Then they slaughtered the sheep to feed everyone who came to visit the sick woman. And finally, they stabled the cow in order to adequately feed the guests at the funeral. And all this time, the mouse watched what was happening through the hole in the wall and thought about things that have nothing to do with anybody. Well, exactly today, we have a meeting with two important institutions, UNITAR and World Information Transfer, who are sharing the same ideas, the same principles, that global problems need global solutions in a global partnership. So I wish you all the best in what you are doing. And I'm always available to assist if it is in my capacities. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Yuri. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Sergeyev. Ambassador Suazo, you mentioned the Secretary General's repositioning the UN system initiative, which Antonio Guterres launched when he joined the United Nations in January. And I know one of the tasks of UNITAR is actually to organize knowledge sharing events for the UN Secretary General, and is actually one of the most critical UN agencies that conducts UN interagency partnerships and knowledge sharing activities. In light of Antonio Guterres wanting to change the UN system and repositioning it as one UN system, how critical of a role has UNITAR played in that process in facilitating interagency dialogue than it previously has?
Oh, thank you very much for that. And it's a very, very, very interesting and important question, because UNITAR every year conduct a retreat. And this retreat is for the Secretary General and the high officials, all the USGs.
The representatives of the UN Secretary General,
yes.
correct.
And they go to Geneva. It's organized by the Executive Director of UNITAR, or in a different location. And basically they discuss, and it's the Secretary General is among them, what is the best way to address certain issues. This is not well known because it's a private in-house gathering in which the policies are made by the Secretary General with the high officials, all the USGs and ASGs and the directors of specialized agencies, and also specific people from the development activities like the Secretariat of the Regional Commissions, also major donor countries of the United Nations, in which they have this almost 3 days conversation among themselves. Those findings and those policies are kept among themselves, and that's when you see new resolutions or new topics come out, or the decisions to invite member states to discuss specific topics. This is a very crucial role, because at the highest level of the organization, and it happened. The other way in which we support directly is, for example, during the high-level political forum, we do this learning center, which is 10 sessions at half a day, morning and afternoon, and where the high official of the Secretariat are guests or comes, and they brief member states participating in the high-level political forum of the topics or agendas. And that's learning center is just not for member states. It's open to non-governmental organizations, to academia, to the development agencies, or the specialized agency of the United Nations. And it's just sharing knowledge of what they are doing, how they are doing, whether there has been successful or where they consider there are some failures and things like that. That's what a learning center. And it lasts for a week. Another example of what we do to enable a better communication is, for example, the General Assembly. Every session of the General Assembly, we do a training session for 2 days, and basically is PG8 who comes to speak at the inauguration. Then all the chairs of the main committees, which are normally ambassadors, come to talk to the member states, to the delegates, and then tell how they envisage their presidency on a specific 6th committee, 1st committee, 2nd committee, and things like that, finance and judicial, disarmament, legal, and things like that. And on the sides of them is the secretariat of the conference management department who support them to tell them these are the resolutions that are coming up, these are the discussion for this General Assembly and things like that. These 3 elements help to shape a little bit of the delivery of information. This year, there is a big resolution that every 4 years happens in the United Nations, is the quadriennial comprehensive policy review of the operational activities for development, better known as QCPR. It's not the Roman ancient code. And every 4 years, the all setup of operational activities for development are reviewed by member states. So UNITAR organized those exchanges among member states, the G77, the Secretariat, in order to debrief and to inform member states about the trends and the elements that has to be addressed in the next 4 years. And the operational activities for development are the most important part of the arsenal of the United Nations to eradicate poverty, to mitigate climate change, to take care of the environmental issues, and to see the ODA, Cooperation for Development frameworks and things like that. So we are going to have, in September 8th, I guess, the final module of the QCPR revision. We already held 3 meetings, 3 modules of it. It was going to be a wrap-up seminar of half a day. Actually, at 2 p.m. today, it has to be again in a Zoom format to detail the organization of the new, the last module of the quadriennial policy review of the operational activity for development this afternoon. I don't know if that helped to your.
Excellent. No, that's a very good summation.
Thorough
Of
summary.
the work of UNITAR. Yes. Excellent. I'm conscious of time, Ambassador. We're almost 2 minutes to the hour. Are there any sort of final remarks that you would like to make? We will share the materials that you sent with our network so they have access to all of UNITAR's sort of policy documents. But in closing, if there's any summation that you want to make on the next chapter for UNITAR, then you have the floor.
Oh, thank you very much. I was very happy to be with you today. I wanted, as I said at the beginning, thank you for the trust to convey this message to the participants. I have an open door business operation, if may I call it business. And please come with us in any particular issue you may feel we can collaborate. I'll be very, very happy to do so. The other thing is that UNITAR is a service institute for education and training and capacity building. If in any particular area you consider that we can collaborate, just let us know. If we can, with the world's transfer of information, if you wanted to have an institutional understanding with us, it's very easy. We can send you the template of a MOU. Like that, we can plan a better or training sessions. We can share with you those training sessions. You can invite people to come to us. They are for free. So it just, the executive director, Mr. Said, used a very good phrase the other day. I repeat it every time that I am on the platform, that the COVID-19 pandemic has helped us to democratize education. We were receiving in New York a specific number of beneficiaries participant in a face-to-face program. 34 events through the year. They give us an enormous number of people. With the webinars and the Zoom events, those numbers are double or triplicate.
Yeah.
So because more people have, I don't want to say they have more time, everybody's still busy, but they feel a prioritization of events. You can have a cell phone or an iPad on your side, and you can follow another meeting, just listening, taking that, and then you participate in another. So you have the famous multitasking possibility. So please continue with us. We're very happy to share our knowledge, our expertise, our documentations, and
thank you very much.
Please join us. It has been a pleasure and an honor. And thank you very much for the invitation. It has been a pleasure to see Yuri with us today. And also, just don't hesitate to reach us out. That's all.
Thank you, Ambassador. We would definitely take advantage of your wonderful offer because our interns always go, we get passes for them, so they are capable, once the passes are active, they can go to the UN and participate. We are most grateful. And again, thank you for a wonderful presentation. It has been just exceptional. So we look forward to seeing you again in the near future.
We'll be here, either by TV or by present.
Both, hopefully.
There is a word that our dear colleagues, our dear friends from the Arab world use, inshallah. So.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Excellent.
Bye now.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you everyone for joining this Virtual Voices series. Our next series is actually kicking off right now, and we have the entire alumni team joining us, previous interns at the UN, to discuss where they are now in life and how beneficial their internship at the United Nations with World Information Transfer has been. See you shortly. Thank you very much.